you hear a lot of people talk about, so people's like, oh, I want, when I die, I'm going to leave a legacy. And I'm like, I want to kind of do it while I'm alive. Like,
Yeah.
I want to be, if it helps other people, I mean, that, even if it helps 5 people, it's like,
Yep.
that's great. I mean, I'm not going, I mean, I'm not doing this as like I'm out there to change the world or I'm better than anyone. Cause I think like a lot of this self-experimentation shows, like, I discovered things about myself were things that were wrong. I was like, oh,
Mm.
here's a theory, here's something I did. But hopefully it just inspires people. Like, I just hope, I'm not going to tell people how to be healthier or,
Yep.
how to get stronger or faster. It's like, I just want them to understand how they can kind of set in these protocols or, structure things to go on their own journey. And hopefully that, somehow inspires them to do it and probably do it better than I can.
You're listening to the Live Life Longer show with Dan Voss, where we discuss longevity, anti-aging practices, biohacking, having more energy, and living a happier, healthier life. In today's episode, I interview Bob Troia about advanced biohacking tips to upgrade your health, like glucose monitoring, heart rate variability, sleep hacks, nasal breathing, and some of the best biohacks available today. Bob Troia is a technology entrepreneur and citizen science who has been at the forefront of digital innovation and emerging technologies for 2 decades. A leading voice of the Quantified Self and biohacking movements, Quantified Bob documents his personal efforts at the intersection of data-driven citizen science, health and wellness, human performance, longevity, and self-optimization at quantifiedbob.com. So Bob, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a real honor.
Great. Yeah. Great to be here.
Yeah, this is good. I'm really interested in having an in-depth conversation with you, mostly around biohacking and self-quantification, which I know is something you're really big into. So let's start with that. I understand, you even call yourself Quantified Bob. You measure almost everything about your body. So tell us, how did you get into this field of self-quantification?
Sure. I'm just one of those people who has always been really into understanding myself better. I had a curious mind going back into high school and sports and athletics. You were trying to figure out how to move the needle in terms of performance. I was doing a lot of track and field, for example. And back then, you didn't have all the tools we had today. So we were using pretty stopwatch, scale, that kind of stuff, ruler. And it was interesting to keep track of these things, and even things like workouts, just to see what things help or have minimal effect. And as I got older, still being an athlete and doing things like that, and you get into the real world, you start thinking more about health and wellness, and you're trying to be an A-type top performer. Like, I'm an entrepreneur. What's going to keep you at the top of your game, just physically, mentally, etc. And so for me, it was always about trying to figure out what will move those, what knobs can you turn to get an optimal result. And you might find like certain things don't add a whole lot. In some cases, it might be things where 1 + 1 is 3. You might actually find some combinations of things. And so, the whole self-quantification, it's one of those stories where I was doing it for a long time. And then about 10 years ago, I discovered there was a group of people that started in the Bay Area that created a community called the Quantified Self movement, which their slogan was self-knowledge through numbers or through data. And I was like, wow, there's other people like me, and I'd been doing a lot of this on my own and connecting with that community. Now, keep in mind, those are people that are understanding themselves, and it's not all about health or your body. I mean, you can be tracking everything from social encounters with people to location tracking to looking at finances, for example. But there was a natural overlap with what became this biohacking community. And for me, it was really just once I started documenting this more publicly, like I had always been keeping track of things I was experiments I was doing, etc. And I decided after one conference, I remember being in the hotel room, I was like, well, I should just start a blog or just get the stuff on, start posting it, just more for me to get it down so I have a better way to organize some of this information. And I needed a domain name. I literally, Quantified Bob was the first thing that I just thought of. And I was like, oh, the domain's available. So I grabbed it, set up a quick blog that night, and that was 9 years ago or so,
Yeah.
maybe years ago, and then the rest is history with that. I mean, it's really just been me documenting. Never expected anyone else to care about what I was documenting, because it was really just for me at first. And
Hmm.
when people discover a self experiment I had done, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm really into that as well, and I'm trying to, or I took what you did and my results were different, and I'm like, that's exactly the point. Like, we're all individuals, single subject, N of one, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
And so the whole point is we can put ourselves under the same conditions, and because of our individuality, we'll tend to see different results. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's really it. In this kind of world of the community of biohacking or quantified self, it's just a great group of people that have really self-identified. They're really just into self-optimization.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that story of how you came across Quantified Bob was through finding a domain name that was available. I think it's really good branding though, because it's obviously your name, but it identifies with your passion, and it's unique for sure. I'd also add to that, it seems like you were kind of born right into the right era. You're somebody that's passionate and have a strong interest in this topic, and if you were born 50 years ago or 100 years ago, you wouldn't have access to all of the tools that you do have access to in the 21st century. So I would say, the timing was quite right there for what you're interested in and the technology that's available to us.
Even like 15 years ago, when I was, or 20 years ago, or in high school, when I was looking for certain information, I'd have to
Yep.
go to like a library and take out a
Right.
book, a nutrition book, because that information, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have access to nutrient databases, et cetera,
Yep.
and you had to dig that stuff up. So I do think, about being the right place at the right time. Yeah, I mean, just even from an economic standpoint, I mean, there's, a genetic test was $1 million, like a full
Right.
genome sequence, just like 10 years ago. And now I just had a full genetic sequence done last winter for
Okay.
like $200.
Very cool. Yeah.
Like
I've,
full, not
I,
23andMe, like full sequence, like full
yeah,
terabytes of data. Yeah.
it's super cool. I have a DNA kit on its way right now, actually, because I haven't had one done before. So I'm looking forward to kind of diving into that genetic, sequence and finding out a little bit more about my DNA. And it's just incredible that it's so accessible and so affordable now compared to, like you said, when it first came out years ago. It was so much more expensive and not as accessible for your average person like us. Very cool. So that being said, and this is probably a little bit more of a broad question, but hopefully you can kind of narrow in on some specifics here. What are some of the things that you like to focus on when it comes to self-quantification and measuring your body? Is it sleep? Is it nutrition, fitness? Like, what are some of the big things that you really enjoy the most?
Sure. I mean, you got to think of it in terms of layers. So you have this sort of always on kind of passive tracking. So if you wear any kind of wearable, like I've got an Aura ring on, I've got
Yep.
a BioStrap on, for example, like that's tracking your general daily activity, things like steps or movement, sleep, heart rate variability. And even if I'm not looking at that data, it's collecting. So I can go back over time. I can look at something from years ago and just be like, oh, what happened during that period? So that doesn't require a whole lot of effort on your part. So that's like a very easy win.
Right.
I have a wireless body composition scale, so like tracking that every day, because there's an accuracy plus minus with it every day. I'm not losing 2% body fat every day, but if you just look at the trend, it's going to be pretty accurate.
Mm.
With regards to other markers like HRV, you can track it like overnight. Some of these devices do it, but I like to take it first thing in the morning before I even get out of bed. I get a reading, like a truth reading, and that's a good sign for you trend that to see. You probably talked about this before with like things like recovery, or did I train hard yesterday? Did
Yep.
someone go out? If I went out the night before too late or something like that, it's a recovery day. And if your baseline kind of, that's, when you talk about layers, you've got that kind of aspect. And on top of that, you might be doing things like glucose monitoring. So I'll
Mm-hmm.
be tracking glucose or ketones. I don't need to do it every day.
Yep.
I've worn I've done finger stick glucose checks and ketones. I've done it with trying it with different foods or fasting.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went and got there's continuous glucose monitors now that you wear it. It goes on the back of your arm and has a tiny needle that goes into the skin,
Mm-hmm.
and it's passively collecting glucose data 24/7 for 2 weeks. and then it's a disposable sensor. And now you've got a lot more data points, but you can also see things like what happens while you're sleeping or exercising, or so that's something that again requires a little more effort. And I might do that, every quarter or so, if I've got certain experiments for that. Other things, you can be like we talked about genetics and DNA. More or less, you just have to do that once, right? Your DNA isn't changing,
Right.
but now there's another layer called epigenetic testing. So that's a nice to have where you're going to see the effects of the environment on your body. So it's like you can change gene expression. So knowing that like you've got a fast twitch sprinter gene or whatever, that's going to show up in any genetic test you do. But there's other markers that are showing when they talk about your biological age versus your chronological age, and they're coming up with these markers to see, your tissues are aging at different rates, et cetera. That's a nice to have. Things like gut testing, microbiome testing. That you do more frequently because that's always changing. But, I think for a lot of people, they dive into some of that, and it's just way more information than they can even. It just because it's still kind of like a new area, and so even those tests are trying to really focus it down to things like diet in terms of which foods not just cause inflammation or something like that in your body, but it might be like which things keep you the most metabolically at a good place from the standpoint of your glucose levels and
Sure.
things like that. There's all sorts of lab tests. We can talk all day about that, and that just comes down to like what are you trying to it's good to get once, let's say even if someone gets one full workup of blood testing a year, you might want a few more data points than that. There might be other things that, at certain times you'll want to dive in on. It just depends on what your goals are. I think it's the first thing people want to do is understand themselves at a baseline level, and then start layering on top of that or focusing on areas. I think some people they worry about something in some specific area, and it's not even like a huge issue. They fix some other things in another area that'll work itself out.
Sure.
You got other kind of markers like things like blood pressure, body temperature. I think we can dive into like a lot of like, especially with what's going on with COVID and all that. I had always been checking things like blood oxygen saturation is another marker that's important. So I've had a pulse oximeter for a number of years. I've done to do a lot of breath work and other training that incorporates high and low oxygen. So I was, kind of paying attention to that and body temperature and some sleep data because when we were talking about, people predicting illness, there were some key markers in there that, were showing like, look, you can see some of this, not necessarily COVID, it could even be the flu. Like you can see it a few days coming on. Versus, with technology, we can talk all about, there's all sorts of toys and cool things you can be measuring that just you have the money for, and it might be a cool insight for yourself, but it's not an everyday thing. Like I think when you said earlier, like I tracked everything, I was like, well, I have tracked a lot of things. Doesn't mean I'm always tracking everything. I mean, some of this has been built on to be more passive. Like the air quality in my home is being tracked 24/7. So I set it up. I don't have to do anything. Again, it's passive. But if I want to go do an experiment, I can say, okay, well, I can take those data points, stack them with sleep data, and stack them with other things, and see like what happened there. Maybe they just have an effect on something else. So, and then with exercise and training, that's more just tracking workouts. For me, I've got notebooks going back 25, 30 years. I mean, I literally have stuff written down, old workouts. It's cool to go back and look at. I think when we talk about diet and nutrition, I mean, things like, keeping a meal diary, looking at that, I'll use a more comprehensive tool like a MyFitnessPal or something to just get like 3 or 4 days worth of data, maybe like once or twice a year. I'm pretty dialed in with what I eat just to make sure I'm hitting certain macros and at the high level, but day to day, I'm not as worried about counting calories. I mean, if you're eating a certain way and you kind of stay with that program, your body, I just know for me, for example, it'll regulate pretty well. I actually built a meal tracking app about a year ago that it's just focused around photos, because I realized like really what's important is just seeing like the timing, especially if you're trying to eat in the eating window. All the information is in the photo, so you don't have to like count calorie. For me, I'll do a gut check like that once or twice a year, but other than that, it's more about behavior, seeing trends. Like, are you always going for that extra cup of coffee at 4 in the afternoon, or are you eating these late meals? Well, you had this, you had some gluten-free pizza at like
Yep.
9 p.m. last night, and look at your sleep, it got wrecked. Or, you worked out when you had a bad workout and you realized, well, you didn't fuel it, properly that day. So
That's cool.
you can look at all sorts of, different areas there. And, there's all, new things coming out every day, it seems, with new ways to measure all sorts of aspects of your body and your mind. We can talk about, using EEG to measure brain activity and understand the effects, like like people are using tools like neurofeedback to sort of correct deficiencies there, or use that to guide things like meditation, for example.
Yeah, very cool. There's a few things I want to unpack here. Tell me a little bit more about this app that you created. So you take a picture of your food, and then what?
So the idea is that we display all the meals on, basically it's a timeline. So think of like 24 hours in a day, and you have 7 days in a week. And if you saw everything, all the little thumbnails, all the images on that grid, you would see like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. These are the times that you ate all, or meals or coffee, or you could use supplements, etc. And if you had an eating window, it would sort of be highlighted. And the photos themselves contain a lot of information. Beyond just what's in the actual meals. Like you could see like if this person is always lacking vegetables, or something like that. But you could also extract things like the actual timestamp. When was the meal eaten? Like that's in the photo. There's metadata there. Depending on the settings on your phone, location data is in there. You can use things like, and this isn't in the app yet, but it's coming. Just object detecting what the items are. So at least you can tag it yourselves. You might say, like in this photo, I just want to make a note that this was some of my steak or protein or something like that, or coffee. And instead of you having to type it all in, it'll kind of suggest those for you already, so that
Got it.
just saves you using some artificial AI to just speed it up a little bit. But the idea was just more about being able to guide, giving you kind of an understanding as to what's going on. And I don't expect, again, not everyone's going to be tracking every little thing they eat every day, entire year. So, like the idea is you can open it up, use it for a week, put it away.
Yep. Very cool. What's the name of that app?
It's just called Awesome Meal.
Awesome Meal, and that can be found on any app store.
If you go
iTunes
just go to isjustawesome.com. That's my company, Awesome Labs. We've got several apps we've built around health and wellness, and it's all there, and you can link to it. It's iOS and Android. I believe
Sweet.
It's free.
Sweet. I kind of want to touch a little bit further on, what is the purpose of tracking everything that you do track? Let's go into, you talked about glucose monitoring and tracking ketones. Why? Like, what's the purpose of it, and what are you doing with all of that data?
Sure. I mean, there are basically three reasons that people get into this idea of self-tracking or self-quantification. And the first is which is kind of the way I was led into it, was it's really about self-discovery, just understanding more about yourself and what you can do to get, even if you feel like you're an 8 out of 10, you want to be a 9 or a 10 out of 10. How do you get there? Which things positively or negatively affect it? That's kind of one aspect. And I think I'm a technology guy, so I love data and tech, and so for me it's cool that we do have access, that we can do this stuff now, and it's really exciting. The second reason is often that someone comes at it from, they've got a health challenge. They've got something they're trying to either figure out, or they know what it is and try to solve it. And so that's another approach that you'll tend to see people come into this at, and then they see how, maybe they resolve something and they realize, wow, I feel better now. I can feel even better, and they keep going down that path. And then the third angle is really more about you're testing a theory. So you might say, like, okay, I think that if I do X or Y, I'm going to have a better result in some whatever aspect you want to, that's your outcome, right? And so you could structure it, set up an experiment, or set up, you've got your theory, and then you do it. And so those are really the three reasons. And for me, I would say, when I really first got into the biohacking side of a lot of this, there was some energy kind of fatigue issues I was dealing with. I was trying to be like an entrepreneur, an athlete, playing in a band, and on the outside everything looked great, but inside I was just exhausted. And so I had to that was where I started having to dig deeper and uncover like what these challenges were, and you realize there's gut issues, and you had some some stuff from Lyme disease, or you had some stuff from autoimmune issues. And so as you start resolving something, that takes time. It's not going to fix. You can't fix it overnight. And you start feeling better, and you realize like, wow, I can't believe I was able to do what I was doing, where I was basically had this big impediment on me. It was like having that parking brake on the whole time.
Yep.
And so for me now, it's just still that mainly that journey of self-discovery and self-optimization. It's I'm not looking for things that are broken to try to fix them. I'm taking it more from the standpoint of how do I take, if I feel good, how do I feel better, and how do you keep going that way. Especially we're not getting any younger, and now we talked about performance. We talked about now we're moving towards longevity, and so now I'm like, what are the things I should be doing now to make sure, like, what can I detect now, or what should I be implementing to make sure that something like something as simple as like type 2 diabetes, which is just prolific in the world, that doesn't happen overnight. That's something that's happening to people over literally decades. And all of a sudden someone goes, hey, you're type 2 diabetic. And I was like, well, that's why healthy people are now wearing continuous glucose monitors and checking the blood sugar, because it's like, I don't want you can catch that stuff way in advance and make
right.
And if it's a lifestyle driven issue, then you have a lot of time to resolve that, make those changes.
Yeah. I love that idea of self-discovery and self-optimization. If you think about your average person, especially in the US, most people are kind of just getting by when it comes to their health. They're just like trying to do just enough to be kind of healthy. But they have so much information out there. There's so much information that we have and that we've known about and that we're continuing to learn about. Unfortunately, a lot of people just don't know where to begin, or just are like overwhelmed with all the information. So I think your approach of like real tactical steps and like real quantification, it's a step in the right direction for people to say, okay, I can actually do something about my health that's like real hard evidence, that has real data, and I can use that to improve my health, my performance, my well-being. So I just that's I think why I'm so fascinated about this topic, is that it gives people a real action plan.
Yeah, I think it's your point about a lot of information. I think there's two problems with that. One is you can get conflicting sort of information, right? Like, this is bad, and someone else will say the same thing is good.
Yep.
And the average person doesn't know like who's the trusted source, who's right, who's biased, and that's that can be dangerous in some cases,
right.
Depending on what you're But then other people, they adhere to something, and we're creating these camps of like, I'm carnivore and I'm keto and I'm vegetarian, and it's like becomes like people are so big, they identify with something to the point where you can't
like a tribe.
it. Yeah, and something you have to understand is like, and for some people, like something, I know some vegetarians that are super healthy, like it works for them. They've figured out how to do it and build muscle and do all this. And I know people who are on carnivore and having miraculous results.
Yep.
But I do think, something I've had to do over time was going back to the beginnings of like addressing health issues. I thought I was doing everything right. Like my diet at that time was like, it was considered like the healthy, like I was eating very low, like almost like no fat, like lots of lean protein. And I was realizing like I didn't have like my cholesterol, my testosterone levels were down. I was fatigued. I didn't have energy. And once I rethought my approach to diet, and let's call it more of like a paleo type diet, where I was getting a lot more healthy fats and things like that, I saw my energy just uptick, ability to build muscle increased. And so you have to kind of, it's good to always kind of be a skeptic about things, but I do think you also need to, as you approach something, you want to make sure that you're willing to listen, at least, even the craziest sort of other idea, this list, like, hey, I'm willing to, someone can tell me any theory they have and I'll listen to them as long as they can back it with some information and data. And I'll say, great. And I go, maybe it's not for me, but to say you're wrong, you're right. I mean, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to tell someone like this is the way to, all I can say is this is what I've done for me and
Right.
my results. And, you don't have to agree with me.
Yeah. I think that's what's so cool about the topic of self-quantification is that it is very much individualized for each person. We have science, we have data, we have discoveries that we've made along the way that we know as like the foundation to health and science. But then from there, people can take that information and kind of experiment on their own and figure out, what kind of nutrition is best for them, what kind of exercise is best for them. Look at the data that they're getting from some of these measurements from self-quantification and apply that to their own life to really just make it unique for their lifestyle. So I think that's probably one of the coolest things about the entire field. That being said, so with health, I look at there's like three big pieces of living a healthy lifestyle, right? You have nutrition, sleep, and fitness or exercise. To me, those are probably one of the three of the biggest pillars. Of course, there's all kinds of other areas of health, but out of those three, which one would you say is the most important? And I understand all three are very important and they all intertwine and they all connect. But if you had to choose one out of those three, which one would you go for?
Yeah, I would say it has to be sleep. Only because
I would agree.
if you think like what has an effect on the other pieces, like sleep, if you took those three, you said there's three key components. It's almost like if you were a molecule, sleep is the middle, it's the nucleus. Yep. Because if your sleep's terrible, well, that's going to have an effect on other things. And we spend a third of our lives, essentially sleeping, and so optimizing for that's something that we can control. Like I made a big effort in terms of like trying to optimize my sleeping environment,
Yep.
Just because that is something you can probably see the biggest gains for it, and you don't have to spend any money.
Right.
For the most part, it's like these are mostly like behavioral things, understanding, through some data yourself. But yeah, I think a lot of people, they spend all this money on supplements and all those other things, and they have such a crappy sleep hygiene.
Yeah.
and that's messing them up big time.
Yeah, I'm so happy you mentioned. I agree with you that sleep is that key component. I've learned that a lot in the last few weeks. I just got a new puppy, and we're going hard into puppy training and potty training, and she's waking me up every few hours throughout the night, and I didn't realize how good of sleep I was getting before I got the dog, and how little sleep I'm getting now. And I noticed a huge change in my performance, my cognitive performance, even nutrition. I'm noticing I'm slipping up on, like, I guess you call it willpower, or just, the ability to say no to certain foods. Now that I'm like not getting as much sleep or good sleep, I might cave and have that donut, or I've been doing time restricted eating, and usually my eating window starts around noon or 1 p.m. And now that my sleep is all thrown off, I find myself wanting to eat at like 10 a.m. or 9:30, and I'm just like, what? I haven't done this in like a year. So it just goes to show how crucial good sleep is. And you mentioned, that was kind of a big piece for you, is to start optimizing sleep. What are some things that you have done to optimize your sleep?
Sure. So in my bedroom, you want it to be cold and dark.
Yep.
So I put blackout curtains, because I live in New York City. I'm not in New York City right now, but there's extraneous light from outside overnight. You just don't want any of that in the bedroom. So make sure that, even if you have electronics in the room, you want to, flashing clocks and all that, you want to make sure like you get rid of as much of that as possible. Temperature wise, and I've proven this from my data, is like when the cooler the room is, the ambient temperature, I sleep much better. So going cold. I've done things in the wintertime where I've like literally just kept the heat off in my bedroom, just let it drop way down, and I had some pretty great sleep. I mean, you're still under the covers, so you're not like freezing, but it's that ambient temperature. I've experimented with a big win for me was mouth taping. So you get this inexpensive 3M micropore tape, and it's filled peaceful in your mouth. And if you look at your sleep data, you might see like, oh, why? I don't remember waking up 25 times overnight. The little blips, just little blips on the sleep graph. But you realize like, well, you were sleeping with like this with your mouth open, and you were basically were like gasping, kept waking up because you had to take it. It's almost like an apnea, but not as extreme.
Yeah.
And mouth taping just forces you to nasal breathe. And everyone's like, oh, I got problems, I'm going to suffocate. Like you put the tape on. If you're really worried about it, you can put it on loose enough that if you really have to take a breath, the tape will come off. But
Yep.
over time, it's just more of a reminder to you to keep your lips together. So you put it on lighter and lighter.
Yep.
And for me, that was a huge impact in terms of overall sleep quality and efficiency, fewer disturbances. Yeah.
What is it about nasal breathing that's important? Like, why is it bad to mouth breathe?
Well, first off, when your mouth nasal breathing is doing a bunch of things, right? It's cleaning the air is being filtered as it goes through. You produce nitric oxide. It's just a much better, like we're made to be nasal breathers in day to day. I mean, we use our mouths to talk or to eat, et cetera. But you're not supposed to be walking around as a mouth breather. If you sleep with your mouth open, everything's going to dry out. People have issues with that. It's just not, for overall this sort of well-being. I think we don't want to be walking through life like you can't even. There's a bunch of books that recently come out that talk all about breath work and breathing, and they've actually showed some of the scientific backing of the importance of nasal breathing versus people who walk around mouth breathing. Often a lot of it comes down to like when we walk around day to day and you see someone like they sprinted and they're gasping for breath and they're like I mean, that's not gasping for, that doesn't mean they need oxygen. What that's doing is you built up carbon dioxide, and that's people don't have a tolerance for CO2 buildup. And we're seeing this a lot now where people say that they're wearing masks and they're like, I can't breathe. It's because the CO2 is building up and they think they can't breathe, but it's actually the body's, you're freaking out a little bit because the CO2 is building up. And that's why a lot of the breath work and practices you see out there are about getting people to build up that CO2 tolerance, because actually the more CO2 that you have in your body actually allows you to use more oxygen. There's a
interesting.
CO2 actually helps disassociate oxygen from hemoglobin. So, but anyway, so mouth taping definitely was a huge thing for me. I've have a lot of friends and family that have since started doing it, and they also are like, they're sold on it. Like they were skeptics at first, and they realized like, wow, from just behavior wise, for sleep, ditch all the bright light and electronics. We hear a lot about artificial light and blue light blocking glasses and all that. Basically, you want to have an hour before bed. You want to really have a kind of a wind down routine. Because I think for two reasons. One is just, all that light stimulating, like bright light right before bed, we're not really meant for that. And so you'll see people wear those like blue blocking glasses or something that knocks everything becomes like red or orange, or have lighting in your home that kind of does that, or just read an hour before bed. But the other thing is, I think people like they just get, especially now, like we've had an election and all that, and people are on social media like nonstop. They're freaking out.
That mental stimulation.
So they're going to bed completely wired, and that's going to affect your sleep. So you don't have that. You need to really have a routine. Get yourself, like an hour or so before bed. Just do that. That's another tip. And for me, like I notice meal timing is important. If I eat a late meal, that's going to definitely, your metabolism's elevated and all that. That'll be easily seen in the sleep data.
Sure.
But what I like to also do is shift what I'm eating. So like, I'm not going to eating a really huge animal protein meal, like a giant steak for dinner late. Probably not the best thing for me. I actually find where if I shift that earlier in the day, have that for lunch, and then have like a really late dinner, for me, it has a much better effect on sleep. There's tools and modalities you can do, like there's breath work you can do before you go to bed. That'll, for a lot of people, that helps them unwind as well. Just doing even 5 minutes of it before bed. I have we talked about temperature of the air temperature, but you can also cool the actual temperature of the bed. So I have a device called a chillipad.
Yep.
It pumps chilled water into like it sits on top of your mattress, and it's this. It's thicker than like a couple sheet. It's I don't know, maybe like that thick, and it chills. You set the temperature, and it will chill and circulate this water so that the actual, you're sleeping on something that can be cold. And once I started doing that, I stacked that with a cold room. That had a pretty great effect too.
I haven't used the chili pad before. I've heard of it from many people in the field. I believe they also have like two sides to it. So you're sleeping with your partner and they like it a little warmer, they can set their own temperature. Is that correct?
Yeah. So if you have like a queen size or king size bed, it has two reservoirs in there. So you hook two chili pads. Each one's pumping water at different temperatures. So if one person wants it, at 60 degrees and the other person wants it at 55, you can do that. And you can even experiment with it now where you can change the temp, like have it like we get our deep sleep when our body temperature cools down right when we go to bed. That's what that triggers deep sleep. And then we start warming back up as we get towards sunrise, which allows us to get into more REM dream states.
Got it.
So when we fall asleep, our body temperature drops, and as we approach sunrise, the body actually starts warming up, and that's what triggers more dream state REM sleep. So what I was playing around with the chili pad was, well, instead of leaving it on that cold setting all night, you actually want to. What if I shut it off halfway through the night? So I cool down during deep, and
I lost you again, Bob. Shoot. Sorry, Bob, you're frozen on me again.
All right, let's try this one more time. All right.
Sorry about that. Okay, it looks like you're back in, so hopefully we can finish up here with it.
All right. It seems like if I move around, the video gets a little choppy. So I think what I'll do is I'll try to stay still and not move around a lot.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. All right. So I don't know where it dropped off there again.
You were talking about how you start off with the cool temperature and then you shut it off halfway in the night.
Yeah. Okay. And so my theory was that if I turned it off, it's kind of midpoint overnight, that it'll give my body time to then warm back up and not hinder my REM or dream state sleep. And so the newer model for the chili pad is actually like it's on or off. So I have a wall timer that just shuts off at like 4 a.m.
Cool.
But for me, it's a great another great little tool. It, again, costs some money, whereas the other things don't cost really anything to implement, and then behavior wise, I would say just find find that constant sleep schedule. Like some people like they sleep really late all week, and on the weekends they try to catch up on they got this sleep debt. And for me, it's I've been fortunate in that I basically go to bed and wake up the same time every day. And honestly, I don't use an alarm clock. I just wake up. My body is I'm pretty in tune with that, and so I do think that's been and something I realized too when I experimented with different sleep times. I found that if I went to bed an hour later, I wouldn't sleep in an hour later. I'd sort of always wake up at the same time. So if I want to get some extra sleep, I'd have to just go to bed earlier.
Right.
And like right now I'm on the coast here of Florida. And it's like I'm on the beach, and at night, and with daylight savings time now, it's pitch black here at 6 p.m. like pitch blackout, like nothing. And the other night, I fell asleep at 8:30 p.m. Like I've never, like it was so dark out. My body was just like, all right, let's do it, And the sun's up here at 6:15. So, but you have to experiment. I mean, if you live in different parts of the world, we have different circadian cycles, and you have to see what works for you. But I think everyone should be, that is the area. I think sleep for me has been a huge area of focus. And I think for most people, like I've never spoken to one person who will say like, my sleep's a 10 out of 10.
Right.
Like everybody wants to have better sleep.
Yep. And not only is it, I think, the most important out of the three, and again, nutrition and fitness are both very important. I would say sleep is probably the most successful and like easiest things for us to hack and to like make tweaks. Like you said, like you can just lower the temperature in your room. You can, get blackout curtains. You can do some things that are either very low cost or even free. And they're just like small tweaks that you can make over time. Whereas people with, that are looking to change their diet, it might be a little bit more intimidating to like switch their entire diet or have the motivation to work out every single day. Of course, those can be easy things, but they're not always easy things for everybody. So I guess what I'm saying here is sleep. It's something that we can all kind of improve, and most of it's free stuff, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, when I say to someone, okay, get some, we need to start collecting data. We want to look at your sleep data a little bit. And they're, someone will say, well, I already know I don't sleep well, but we're trying to uncover like, well, let's see, we want to get a picture of what's happening overnight.
Yep.
And so I think for anyone to just, we start collecting some of that data and they can start looking into it. And now a lot of these devices, the apps that come with them, they'll give you some advice and guidance too.
Right.
They can detect like, if your heart rate's elevated, whatever, they know you were out drinking last night. They know, like, they'll know if you exercise really hard, you overtrain, there'll be certain indicators, or the opposite, like it knows like you've been pretty active the last few days, but moderately active. Body's ready to take on a better challenge today.
Yep. Yeah. Very cool. I want to kind of get into some more of biohacking stuff. What is the craziest biohack that you've ever tried on yourself?
So I know like a lot of people, they think like there's all this crazy stuff going on with like, going to inject stuff or whatever it is. I'll just preface this with, I research the hell out of anything I ever do. And
Yep.
so, and there's a lot of things that like I simply, the risk reward for me wasn't worth it. So I'd say, nope, I'll pass on that one. Maybe,
Sure.
I don't want to be, maybe I'll try it in a few years when it's a little more established. But there was, I've done some experiments with some peptides, which are basically, chains of, like proteins. If you like amino acids and proteins, they're like, they're signaling mechanisms in the body. So like they all have different. So for a popular one is something like is one called BPC 157, which is body protection compound. And peptides are, what's cool is they circulate through the body and they're a signaling mechanism. So BPC 157, it initiates a repair in the body. So if you've got any like nagging, like my shoulder hurts or my knee, I've got other tissue issues, like it starts initiating like your body's repair. So it's not like, it's not an exogenous, it triggers endogenous, right? Your body is doing the work. It's not like a steroid where you're putting stuff into your body to like like this is just saying, give a signal to the body to do something. And so
Right.
there's the peptides are kind of like we'll say it's a bit of a wild west, and you got to be really careful. I mean, they're not even legal, like some of them in a lot of places. And if you're an athlete, some of them are banned by WADA, and so you got to be just really careful with them, and even down to where you're sourcing them from. Some of these are coming from they're ordering them from like China, and you don't even know like the best case would be that they just don't do anything, and the worst case you actually can be putting something harmful in yourself.
Sure.
So I would say only crazy because that is an injecting sort of thing. But you do it under doctor supervision. There are doctors out there now who are pretty knowledgeable and trained in these areas. I definitely I'd recommend just don't go ordering some stuff and reconstituting it yourself and ordering syringes, and it's like,
sure,
work through a doctor.
Yep.
So there's this treatment called acoustic wave therapy or shockwave therapy.
Okay.
That's out there. Like, so there's these clinics around the country. Basically, it's for men, and they use it. It's been used historically for men that they treat like sexual dysfunction, meaning like it's almost like building blood vessels or breaking up plaque in parts of the body, let's say. But a company came out that had they basically created like a home version. So you don't have to, so instead of spending $3,000 to go to a clinic and have this procedure done, it's just acoustic wave therapy. So it's not like nothing's being put in your body. It's like it's just sonic waves that are
Mm-hmm.
basically like doing all the work essentially to again break up things. And so anyway, there's a company use home, and they were reaching out to some folks in the biohacking community about this product, and I was like, all right, check this out. I mean, I don't have any issues, but they're like, no, it can be used for like there's benefit, for biohackers. It's like
Sure.
performance, and so I was like, all right, I'm game. So they sent me the device, and yeah, so that was interesting. So I can't get into too many details about it, but it's it's nothing, it's not painful or anything like that.
Sure.
But it's something that, like, if you have a significant other, make sure like they're cool with it, and then
Yep.
like but there's, so when we talk about biohacking, I mean, there's other areas that we talk. You had the three pillars there. I think we talk about relationships, sexual health, all that can also
Yep.
be, and even if you're already good, like it was one of those things where I was like, risk reward of it was, once I read through, I knew some people that had done it before and all that, and got lots of information, both from doctors and
Mm-hmm.
people, and everyone's like, yeah, it's the worst case, it just won't do anything.
Yeah. I just had Dr. Amy Killen on. She specializes in sexual wellness, sexual performance,
So
and she was
she's one of the doctors I reached out to.
is that right? Yeah. And she was
Well,
talking about shockwave therapy and treating ED and improving sexual performance.
yeah, but they did the procedure, the original one, right? That was that, and
Yeah.
so when this company reached out to me, I asked, because I know she's knowledgeable on the subject, and I was like,
Yep.
are you aware of this? And so she was vetting this device too through their clinic. So
Got
that
it.
was probably one of the people where I was trying to get some expert opinion on, like, is this something that, the risk reward of it? And
Yep.
so yeah, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, it's a pretty cool community.
Definitely, it really is. I also know you've talked about like infrared light therapy, infrared sauna use. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I love the idea of using heat and cold for the body,
Mm-hmm.
for different, mainly for the hormetic effect.
Yep.
So giving that body a little bit of a stressor, whether you're doing just sauna,
Mm-hmm.
infrared, or, if you can also do, I've done them in isolated things where I've done ice baths, I've done infrared sauna, or even just traditional like hot stuff like sauna. I've also done things where I go back and forth between the two. So I go hot,
Mm.
really hot, plunge in the cold, go hot
Yep.
and cold. Um, I just feel like it's one of those, it doesn't kill you, makes you stronger.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna, things like up regulating your body's immune system. Um, I've done experiments where I was doing it more from a detoxification standpoint. So infrared sauna has a huge detoxifying effect,
Yep.
letting sweating through the skin and all that. And I did an experiment, it's on my site, where I was detoxing. I measured my burden of heavy metals in the
Mm-hmm.
body, everything from mercury and lead to other things, after a 30-day protocol, and retested and saw how I was able to really lower. And those are, often those heavy metals are traditionally, it's like an environmental burden. Something like lead can be in your body for decades, right? It could have been like
Wow.
something from your childhood, you still have it in your body. Whereas
Wow.
other things like mercury, that's probably more acute. That could be, everything from food you're eating, environmental exposure, et cetera. So, yeah, so I think you've got, sauna for me is, the benefits are, you have the sort of detoxification, and you've got the hormetic effect. And then there's also these benefits you hear about, people saying there's heat shock proteins that are the body produces when it's put under that stress. So if you're trying to build muscle and stuff, it actually can help spur that. But
Yep.
not a whole lot of, there's research like in the lab kind of information on that, but I think anecdotally, it's people, we just know, like, we like saunas,
Yeah.
and look for it.
The more and more
Um,
people I talk to, they seem to really, really like saunas. I was just talking to yesterday. I interviewed Dr. Jerry Polak. He kind of discovered a fourth phase of water, which is called easy water, and it's supposed to be really good for producing energy in our cells. And he was talking about the importance of sauna use and how it can generate easy water in our cells. So this is a guy that studies water, and he is even into sauna use. So I think that's pretty cool. Another thing I've really become obsessed with lately, it's nothing to do with sauna use, but there is cold hot therapy there, is the Wim Hof Method. And we've been talking about breath work and ice baths. And that's something that I've kind of discovered and really implemented in my life in the last year. And I found really incredible benefits with the breath work and then that cold exposure, even just like cold showers every day in the morning, and just noticing a huge difference in my energy levels, my mental clarity, just my mood. Huge impact, I think, in my life.
Yeah, and that's actually another sleep hack that's very individualized. Some people
Yep.
will take a cold shower before bed, and it helps them tremendously. Other people do a hot, it's like everyone has sort of a different response. I mean, I think for
Oh,
me, I know I've benefited more from that cold shower before bed.
okay.
Because it's like you're giving that shock to the body, and then you kind of warm yourself back up when you get into bed, and I fall right asleep.
See, to your
Um,
point, that's super interesting. To your point, with it being individualized, if I take a cold shower, even in the afternoon, like let alone right before bed, but even in the afternoon, it actually keeps me awake longer. I've noticed, and I have a tougher time falling asleep. So for me, it's like I got to get that cold shower in the morning. It jumpstarts my day and everything. And I've noticed the later I take that cold shower, the tougher time I have falling asleep. But to your point, somebody like yourself, or for a lot of other people, that can actually help them, relax. Like you said, you get back into bed and now you're warming back down, and it helps you sleep quicker and better. So it's all individualized.
totally.
Very cool. We have covered a lot. There's so much more I wish we could cover if we had a little more time here, but maybe that'll be a conversation for another day, Bob. Before I get to my last question, where would you like people to learn more about you? I think you mentioned your website earlier, but where can people find out more about you?
Sure. You can go to quantifiedbob.com. That's my site where I document all these self experiments and anything I've sort of come across in those adventures. And then on social media, like Instagram or Twitter, it's just Quantified Bob. Instagram will be more like where I might be sharing more like short form, here's the things that are happening in real time.
Right.
Blog is more like the long term, like really thoroughly written experiments.
Cool.
So I think you can get, there's different information on both of those, but I think they're both useful for people.
Very cool. I'll have all of that linked up as well in the description and show notes. So my last question for you, and I kind of addressed this earlier in terms of like, why are you doing all of this? Why quantification? Why look at the data? But when you look at why you're doing this, who is it that you want to impact the most with the work that you're doing?
I mean, I feel like you hear a lot of people talk about, so people's like, oh, I want, when I die, I want to leave a legacy, and I'm like, I want to kind of do it while I'm alive. Like,
Yeah.
I want to be, if it helps other people, I mean, that, even if it helps 5 people, it's like, that's great. I mean, I'm not going, I mean, I'm not doing this as like I'm out there to change the world, or I'm better than anyone. Cause I think like a lot of this self-experimentation shows, like, I discovered things about myself or things that were wrong. I was like, oh, here's a theory, here's something I did. But hopefully it just inspires people. Like, I just hope, I'm not going to tell people how to be healthier or how to get stronger or faster. It's like, I just want them to understand how they can kind of set in these protocols or structure things to go on their own journey. And hopefully that somehow inspires them to do it, and probably do it better than I can.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a cool message to look at what you're doing and kind of, improve your performance and self-optimization, but then help other people along the way to look at what you're doing, and maybe they can take some of the things that you're discovering along the way and they can tweak it for themselves and improve their lives. So kudos to you. Keep up the good work. I appreciate your time, Bob. And thank you again for coming on.
Well, yeah, thanks again. It's been great.